Here's a segment from a recent Gun Talk radio episode. You can listen to all the Gun Talk radio podcasts however you tune in, or check out guntalk.com for more. Riots across America for the last 18 months, defund the police, mayors who are telling the police don't show up, don't arrest people, DAs who are releasing people once they get arrested, and a general demoralization in police departments. Well, joining me to talk about that and a whole lot more, Wayne Black joins us from Wayne Black & Associates. Hey, Wayne, how you doing?
I'm good, sir. How are you? Thanks for having me on, Tom.
You bet. All right, so first of all, I'm not going to steal any of your thunder. I'm going to let you tell as much or as little as you want to about your very interesting background when it comes to firearms, safety, protection, and everything else.
Well, I'll make it quick, Tom, so we can get right to the subject matter. I was with the Metro-Dade Police Department and then a law enforcement supervisor at the State Attorney's Office in Miami in the Organized Crime Division. And I've been lucky enough for the past 15 years to be the PSD lead for Secretary Rumsfeld. And when he's not traveling abroad, we're doing law enforcement training and civilian firearms training here in the U.S. So that's pretty much what we do.
Okay, so you've been around law enforcement a long time and also working high-level VIP protection, that type of deal. And as a result, you work with and talk to cops all over the country, as well as doing all your training and everything. What are you hearing? What's going on now? I mean, we've seen the events in the news, but how's that affecting the police departments and individual officers?
Well, Tom, it's really affecting the morale. You know, since all this craziness started, all the rioting and things like that, we're talking to law enforcement officers all the time, and everybody knows that a lot of people are retiring early and all the rest. The untold story, though, and the media is not covering it, is what's happening at the dinner table or the breakfast table when the law enforcement officer talks to his or her spouse and they say, look, is it really worth it? Your chief's not backing you. Is it worth the risk? There's this thing going on in this country where we talk about crazy stuff like defunding the police. And just yesterday at the Homestead Training Center, I talked to a SWAT commander who left because of this. And he's now private, but we get calls all the time. We're lucky in Florida because police officers around the country are flocking to sheriff's offices. You know, the sheriff's office is a constitutional office, and they back their people, and they're coming to Sheriff Wayne Ivey in Brevard County, Palm Beach Sheriff's Office, Rick Bradshaw, and of course the very famous Grady Judd in Polk County. And law enforcement officers are coming in as lateral entries because they know these constitutional sheriffs, constitutional officer, will protect them. But last summer, it was just crazy. You know, I think every city in America is one police shooting away from a riot. And look what happened last summer when police were told to abandon their precinct house. And, you know, Antifa and BLM and other groups saw that as a green light, and then we saw what happened. Across the country, we saw police chiefs. You remember this. Your listeners will remember this. Actually kneeling in front of some of the Antifa and some of these groups in daytime photo ops, and then their officers had to fight the same people at night throwing firebombs at them. So talk about a morale issue.
Well, you got to know that there are spouses, wives, and husbands of police officers who are saying, honey, I don't want you to do this anymore.
Right. Well, and they're asking us, what does the private sector look like? And, you know, we could hire a couple hundred people. We don't have the work for that many. We always have former law enforcement, but, you know, we don't have that kind of work in the private sector. I wouldn't blame them in today's atmosphere if they went off and sold insurance or did whatever they did. It's just so darn dangerous. And then when we have this exploiting and indoctrination of our kids,
yes,
and I'm reminded of what's happening now in Israel with Hamas. Hamas and the Palestinian Authority have done that for years. They have exploited children and indoctrinated children to think that the Israelis are evil, so they grew up like that. Well, now, with the 1619 Project and things that are happening here in this country, that crazy thing written, the 1619 Project, written by a couple reporters, not historians, that are trying to skew history. I think, Tom, they're trying to do the same thing to our children. It's just a frightening time.
Well, if you're a police officer, you're also subject to being assaulted by just citizens out there who are screaming at you, throwing things at you, just as you're just doing your job. And and you're the one who's out there that if they get into trouble, who are they going to call? They're going to call 911, and they're going to be ticked off that the police didn't get there any more quickly than they did at the same time when they're calling them names and throwing stuff on them.
That's right. And, this whole, I mean, you and your listeners are, but not many of us are, we're not standing up like we should be. And the statistics are really simple with regard to systemic racism, for example, and I think that's what's starting it. For example, since April 14th of this year, 6,200 people have been shot and killed by law enforcement officers. 40% of that, 2,883 to be exact, were white. 24%, 1,400, were black. Only 6% were unarmed, and 90% of that 6% were trying to take the firearm from the police officer at the time. So the media has allowed this pernicious myth to spread throughout the country. Even the President of the United States and the Secretary and the Attorney General 2 weeks ago talked about systemic racism in police departments. It's crap. It's not true. But it's catching on like more than the virus.
Let me ask you a question. You mentioned something that's interesting there. You mentioned the people who are trying to take a weapon from an officer. And I go all the way back to Ferguson, which is, of course, what Michael Brown was doing. He didn't have his hands up when he was shot. He was trying to take the firearm from an officer. As a veteran officer and a trainer, is it not true that the statistics are if someone actually gets the firearm away from the officer, he is going to be shot with that handgun?
Absolutely. And if they're going after your firearm, they're getting ready to use deadly force. That's a justifiable shoot on the part of the officer to use deadly force to prevent someone from getting your firearm. They could kill you as the officer or others.
Okay, I thought so. So a couple of things that I'm thinking here. One is that the general safety of the public is degraded when the police are not available or they don't show up or they're not there as much. I mean, we've seen what's happened with the crime stats over the last year as police departments are under fire, if you will, and the criminals are emboldened to go out. Is that a fair assessment of that situation?
Of course it is. Look at St. Louis, for example, and some of the other cities. They're defunding police departments. They're not filling 100 slots in St. Louis. Crime's going up 50%. They're taking away $4 million, and that's happening across the country. Those poor people in Portland and Seattle, way out west, I mean, that's why they're all moving to Colorado, Texas, and Florida so they can be.
All right, so that's on the grander scale. On the boil it right down to the individual scale, and you trained a lot of individuals also. What should we as individuals who are concerned with our safety, who are gun people, what can we or should we be doing in view of what's going on with this situation?
Well, in the short term, at least during this administration, for the time being, I mean, you got to realize, which is why gun sales have gone off the charts, you're on your own. You've got to survive. I mean, people say, well, if something happens, I'll call the police. Okay, so in best case scenario, the police are 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Whatever it is, the attack on you or your family is over in 30 seconds. So what should people do? They should train if they can, well arm themselves, but training is so important. I saw you at a gun site, and that's a fantastic training area out west. Here in Florida, we're lucky to have people like Randy Kane at Southern Exposure, but there are good trainers all over the country. People need to get trained and be proficient to protect their family.
And just be aware that the threat is greater than it ever has been, I think, and it can pop up at any given time. I mean, I realize that it may sound paranoid to some people, but I've gotten to the point where I won't go out and pick up the mail from the street without wearing a gun.
Yeah, no, that's not paranoid. That's planning and to survive.
I'm reminded of something Jeff Cooper from Gunsight wrote one time. He says, If you're reading this and you cannot reach out and touch your gun, you have not learned the lessons we teach here.
Yeah, I think that's right. And your good friend Steve Tarani makes that clear in his book, Your Most Powerful Weapon, Using Your Mind to Stay Safe. It's all about situational awareness.
Yeah.
And just as an aside, my wife read the book
Mm-hmm.
with once, Tom, and she said, now I know what you've been talking about all these years.
It's a great book, and I've recommended it over and over. It's a Steve Tarani, Your Most Powerful Weapon. You can get it off Amazon. It's not a big book. It's an easy read, but it is chock full of those aha moments like that.
It sure is. It's all about preparing not to be in the situation where you have to defend yourself.
No, it's preparing you so you can notice it, you can avoid it. You can evade it, you can choose not to be there, and then what to do if you get caught up in the middle of it. Wayne, can people take advantage of your service, of your company?
Yeah, we do some civilian training down here in South Florida, and we're doing assessments around the country. We did some training in Montana. But look, we're happy to help. We're a small group. We do some one-on-one training for executives and people that just.
And you work with churches. I know you do that.
We do. Yeah, we do. We train sheepdogs for free, by the way. If a church has got a group of people that they want to be armed, we'll check them out, make sure they know what they're doing. We'll try to give them some advice on good equipment, but we'll train the sheepdogs for free.
That's terrific. Is the best website that wbgroup.us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's WB for Wayne Black, wbgroup.us. Wayne, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for sharing your vast experience with us here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Look forward to seeing you somewhere down the road there. We'll get together.